Hey Pokemon Masters, Birdkeeper Toby here, and today I find myself on the Coney Island Boardwalk, or to those of you who have played Pokemon, November Town, the starting town for Pokemon Black and White. But in Black and White 2, we get access to two new areas, Route 17 and 18, home to some of the biggest, baddest, and most legendary bugs of the Unova region. I'm talking about an egg that will eventually hatch into Larvesta and become Volcarona, or of course the P2 lab that produced Genesect. So let's take a look at these bugs of the past and future, and what they mean for the Unova region.
You've all heard the classic Pokemon theory. There's a Pokédex entry that says that both Genesect and Kabutops lived 300 million years ago, and that they were both great hunters. So people have taken to the idea that the fossil of a Kabutops was revived, and then the Pokemon experimented on by Team Plasma on Route 18. There it was augmented and powered up, given a cannon, and changed from Kabutops into Genesect. It's a fun little Pokemon theory, but not one I'm convinced of. The Pokemon are just too different for me. They're both very different types, of course, with one being rock-water and the other being bug-steel. I get the rock upgrading to steel, and maybe Kabutops wasn't always part rock type, but it, like many other fossil Pokemon, probably gained that as part of the revival process, but the body shapes are different. Genesect is missing Kabutops' back plates, and it's missing the sides, the key thing that makes Kabutops such an incredible hunter. Some people have suggested that it's some sort of ancient version of Slither, and while Scizor does gain that steel typing, when we look to Kleavor, which existed a few hundred years ago, we can see that Kleavor's hunting style lent itself more to these curved blades in an axe shape. And again, not a trait you want to remove, even if you are sticking a giant cannon onto the back of this Pokemon. No, instead, my favourite candidate for the Pokemon that Genesect was sort of revived from and altered from is some ancient form of Paris. Immediately, you can look to the arms of these Pokemon and see how similar they are. They are the same, not size, not claws, not axes, not scissors. Scizor doesn't really have scissors. Anyway, it has the same stubby arms, and you can sort of see how these Pokemon are similar when Genesect flattens its body and becomes a small disc shape. It looks like it could be some version of Paris. But on top of that, we have the naming conventions. Paris, Parasect, Genesect. It's the same name, like Pikachu and Raichu, or Nidoran and Nidorina. My favourite theory is that a Pokemon like Paris, which is conventionally very, very weak today, couldn't have existed in the ancient past, but instead in those times it evolved into something more formidable. That Pokemon though, that evolution of Paris, was ultimately infected by a not so fun fungi, and ultimately it became Parasect, with the fungi taking over. Paris and Parasect became weaker so that they could serve the fungi's needs. However, we now know with the Pokemon of Old Hisui and fossil Pokemon and the way they revive and resurrect Pokemon in the world of the Galar region, which is just so terrifying. We now know that new ancient forms of Pokemon life are discovered all the time. I believe at that time, Paris, or Parasect, looked very, very different. It looked a lot more like Genesect, standing up on 2 feet before being infected. But it's odd to me that Team Plasma would choose any of these Pokemon, Scyther, Kabutops, Parasect, to turn into Genesect, because there's a much more significant arthropod that exists in the Unova region as part of its central history. Volcarona is effectively a non-legendary Pokemon. It lives in the Relic Castle as a one-of in Pokemon Black and White. The Relic Castle is an ancient place of much mysticism, likely the seat of power for one of the king heroes of the Unova region, despite the fact that it has what I would call a regional variant in another region of Frostmoth. That Pokemon is held in not as high a regard, even though Snub is amazing, and it should be held in that kind of regard. Anyway, this Pokemon is tied into the mythology of the Unova region. It rests in the Relic Castle, which is likely connected to the item, the Relic Crown, which can be found across the region in the Abyssal Ruins. The Relic Castle is in the middle of what is the Desert Resort, which is surrounded by Pokemon like Yamask and Sigilif. These Pokemon suggest the existence of an ancient city there. On the nearby Route 4 in Pokemon Black 2, you actually see houses that suggest this was the case. Volcarona is the sun Pokemon, and it has a Pokédex entry that states, when volcanic ash darkened the atmosphere, it is said that Volcarona's fire provided a replacement for the sun. Volcanic ash. There is a volcano in the Unova region, Reversal Mountain, so perhaps long ago it did in fact erupt, and when its ash darkened out the sun, it was Volcarona that kept the region warm. However, perhaps too warm. The theory suggested on M&J TV's channel a long time ago is that it's possible that it is that warmth of Volcarona living in the castle that then ended up under the sand that ultimately destroyed everything in the area. its heat changing the environment in a way where crops could not grow. This actually matches with the Violet Pokédex entry for the pre-evolution Larvesta. In ancient times, Larvesta was worshipped as an emissary of the sun. However, it was also viewed as a burden, since it often caused forest fires. So, Volcarona surely has the ability to change the environment. Its heat so much it can replace the sun is also probably what caused this area to become arid and desert-like. It's interesting though, this idea that it was worship, because I noticed on Twitter there was a tweet, and this is just something else. Do you know that shiny Larvesta looks like Arceus? Look at the whole little, they're both Pokemon that are worshipped. I don't know, I think there's something there. However, in Area 0, there is a newly discovered Pokemon that may contradict many of these stories of Volcarona in the ancient past. After all, Slitherwing is not a fire type. Then again, perhaps Slitherwing didn't exist in ancient Unova. But these two powerful bugs of the Unova region, Genesect and Larvesta, are actually tied together more than you might think. On Route 18, it is the only place in the whole of the Unova region where you can get a Larvesta egg. It's given to you by a Pokemon Ranger who is just looking for a Pokemon trainer to take this egg into their hands. I don't even think they know what they have or that the Pokemon inside is so rare. However, just a little way upstream against the currents that may have brought the egg to where the Ranger found it, there is the P2 facility, the plasma lab that was built for experimentation on Genesect. N is ultimately against this. He believes that the nature of Pokemon is perfect and not to be manipulated with technology. And yet this lab was built for research of some purpose, to create Genesect. This is where we get the Genesect drives. The scientist who works there is furious that this part of the project got shut down. This must be part of the plasma operation that was being kept secret from N and in control of Ghetsis. And that makes sense. A big part of Team Plasma's plan is about temperature control. They want to use Kyurem to freeze over the cities of Drayden and much of the Unova region. Genesect has the chill and burn drives along with a few others, so perhaps he was trying to create a cannon that could freeze things, but also burn things. If the Larvesta egg was found by this Pokemon Ranger outside or nearby the P2 lab after it was shut down and the project for Genesect decommissioned, perhaps the next step was to look into Volcarona, a Pokemon whose core body temperature can burn so hot it can turn a whole city into a desert. And a backup plan for Ghetsis should anything go wrong with his N plan involving Reshiram and Zekrom. Now, it's interesting to note that the Unova region as a whole exists in this place of paradox, somewhere between the past and the future. It's actually why a lot of the Legends games being talked about right now, people are thinking about Legends UNOVA. The Swords of Justice are part of Unova's legend, and yet there are future versions of them, paradox versions, found around Area 0. If you look to Drayden's city, or the aforementioned Route 4, or the White Forest and Black City, these all represent areas of Unova that are in a state of flux, that depending on which version of events you're playing through, either represent the past or the future. This could have something to do with a Legends game, or time-space distortions at the least, that are implied to have happened over the Unova region. Ingo is found in Pokemon Legends Arceus displaced from his Unova region. I wonder how Emmett's doing. And sure enough, in the tents of the Diamond and Pearl clan, we see an image to what looks like an ancestor to, or perhaps Alder himself displaced in time. Alder's interesting here because he is the main character in the world of Pokemon who uses a Volcarona as his ace. Perhaps even the legends of Volcarona in the ancient past saving the Unova region after a volcano erupts is somehow his Volcarona. So Team Plasma will have known the secret history of Volcarona. The area that this Ranger finds this Larvesta egg in, they were doing experiments on past bug Pokemon, so it makes sense that the egg came from there. The region exists in this paradoxical state between the past and the future, and of course they want to use a Pokemon to take control of the weather and the environment of the region, ultimately to take power. Ghetsis doing so, if not through prophecy and with a puppet king in N, perhaps by his own means with projects like Genesect. I believe that Ghetsis built the P2 lab on Route 18 as a sort of backup plan for if anything should go wrong with N, and this is actually why the Plasma Frigate docks there at the end of Pokemon Black and White 2. It's the last place it has orders to dock. This is Ghetsis' fallback. And had the project been allowed to go far enough, perhaps they finally would have completed what they wanted to work on, converting what they learned from the Genesect project to the Larvesta project, and created Iron Moth, a paradox Pokemon described to be like a UFO from space, much like where Kyurem is from. A Pokemon that now may never come into existence.
Hello there, it's me, Professor Oak. This video's over, so please choose another one wisely, and quickly. Bye-bye.
Just the biggest thank you to those of you who've been supporting this channel on Patreon, including the big patrons of this month, Jed Rubin, Charmander Aznable, Anthony Lee, and the Alligator. Thank you so much.